So, in the last few episodes, we've been teasing the idea of bringing gaming into Cloud with Chris. And today is finally the day we're kicking it off. So, every month, we're going to have a session where we talk about gaming and how cloud influences gaming. So, stay tuned and find out more. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk about all things cloud. Now, as we mentioned in the intro there, we are starting off a brand new series where we talk about cloud gaming, and not necessarily using your phone and cloud gaming as how people think about it these days, but how cloud is influencing gaming. So I'm delighted to introduce today. I've got a guest, a good friend of mine, a fellow Welshman as well. So we've got two Welshmen on the show today. Delighted to introduce Lee Williams. So Lee, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Chris. How are you doing?
All good, thank you. All good. So let's maybe kick off with a bit of introductions on yourself, because I guess first time you've been on the show. So introduce yourself.
Yeah, so Lee Williams. I also work at Microsoft. I'm based in Seattle. I work at Microsoft's corporate headquarters aligned to Azure. Azure for gaming specifically, working to build our muscle in Azure PlayFab, get game developers to build their games on Microsoft cloud infrastructure.
Awesome. And I think you and I have been, chatting for a while. I think one of the things that we're both passionate about is gaming. And for me, I've wanted to figure out, I guess I do a lot of stuff with cloud. In particular, I work with enterprise customers, and figuring out how do some of these cloud concepts translate into gaming. And it's something that we've been talking about, how we can get some more stuff out there for the community. And I think that's how we threw this idea together, right? In terms of let's try this out, see how it goes, and see what we can share with the community here. So I don't think we're necessarily going to talk about everything all in one episode, but we'll start with a bit of Minecraft, I think, today, and see how we get on. So I guess where I was thinking of starting the discussion today, and let's maybe talk about some of your thoughts around this, which is when we think about Minecraft, the way that you kind of play it is you join a specific server. And if we think about games from way back when, like one of the games I always used to play growing up was Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. And you had to go into this kind of server browser. You had to go and pick a specific server and you go and join that server. So that's kind of the thing I figured we might talk about today, just that maybe old way of thinking. I guess some games still do that, but I guess there's a bit of evolution in what's happening in the gaming industry.
Yeah, when we look at the two paradigms, right, you've got the old type of games. Gosh, that's very like some 15, 20 years ago that we used to play.
Yeah.
And let's call it the new games, the new paradigm. Yeah. And there's never been a binary 1 and 0. There's always been like an overlap of cloud gaming in some form of old type game. Even though the advent of Xbox Live with the Ethernet cable, cloud gaming was present there with multiplayer gaming. And that actually, I think, was one of the biggest shifts that kind of really brought the cloud into gaming. And the cloud into gaming is a very broad topic, right? That comes from multiplayer servers, leaderboards, with the xCloud actually generating the game and streaming it back to the customer, to live ops and further enhancing that game. But I think the real big shift that introduced quote unquote cloud into gaming, at least from kind of the hosting perspective and actually creation of the game, was games as a platform. Minecraft is a perfect example of that. It's no longer a game that you pick up off the shelf in GameStop for 40, 50 bucks, 60 bucks nowadays probably. And you have 50, 60 hours of gameplay. You tend to buy an 8-hour game for the same price nowadays, and the rest of the game is built after the fact. You download patches, you purchase add-ons. The game is continually enhanced by its creators through kind of the live ops process, bug fixes, tweaks. And as I say this, I'm not just talking about kind of console gaming. I'm talking about mobile games. Anyone who's familiar with an iPhone or Android will always be aware of the updates that are made to the game. And I think that's how we want to start to kind of think about cloud gaming. It's not the stream a game to your phone kind of mentality. It's how do you leverage the power of devices not on your premise to build, deliver, stream, enhance, run a game. And now that kind of cloud involvement in gaming is super broad. It's no longer hosting a multiplayer server or whatnot. It's actually building the game, as we've seen during COVID, to updating it to many other things. The list is becoming kind of endless.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think maybe let's start just with maybe some basics or some foundations here for the starting session. Let's maybe look at a gaming server. We've got Minecraft on screen. Let's maybe go and think about Minecraft. So one of the things that I pre-recorded before we got on the session, so I'll probably inject it somewhere into the video, was creating a server in Azure. So when we talk about server, it's literally just a virtual machine. It's nothing particularly special, right? It's just some machine running some software on it, and some clients go and connect to it. So if anyone, thinks about it from like an enterprise scenario, like even a public website, I have my phone, I have my laptop, I have my whatever device I'm using. They're all clients that are connecting to some server. And it's the same kind of concept, right? With gaming, you've got a server there potentially, or maybe a fleet of servers when we get into the modern way of working. But thinking of that classic scenario for now, we've got a server, it's accepting some connections and just hosting all of those players on that particular game. And that's really the basics of it, right? So I guess we're seeing a bit of an evolution away from that when we think of games like, I don't know, Sea of Thieves, Halo, and some of those other big games. It's no longer I, as a player, have to go and host my server. That's there for me, right?
Yeah, completely. I mean, those games are built in the new phrase cloud first. They're built, for example, Sea of Thieves is a great example. It's a multiplayer only game. There's no kind of single player story there. So it is built pretty much on a cloud infrastructure architecture where it's all about multiplayer. How you host different scenarios, how when Chris is playing and he moves his character to the left as I'm playing, I also see his character move in the same game, and all that is replicated with different versions. So that's a huge undertaking when you consider a game like Minecraft, in some cases where you have hundreds and thousands of players all simultaneously engaging with one another. That's a huge processing to be able to orchestrate all those individuals, and each individual person gets a different gameplay based on what the other person in the game is involved in. And that can't be done one-on-one. That has to now be undertaken at scale. And I think that's where the involvement of kind of the Azure, AWS, Google Clouds of the world are now really becoming very prominent in gaming, because that's what customers have come to expect in terms of what gaming is. And we're lucky we've grown up in an evolution of gaming. Yeah. But some people have only known gaming as this mentality of it. This is something you do with many other people remotely.
No, absolutely. And I think there's something that you said there about this is what customers have come to expect. And I think when I think of customer, I think of enterprise, because that's just who I work with, right? But when we're talking about that here, we're talking about, gamer, I go grab my Xbox controller, I go and turn on my Xbox, and I want to be able to play games. I don't want anything to disrupt me because, maybe I've had a really rubbish day or whatever it is, and I just want to come home, I want to play those games, and I want to just completely switch off. And making sure that is there is important, right? Making sure that it's all working.
Something you said there is really important as well, which is I come home and I want to play a game. Actually, that behavior is shifting. And what we tend to find now is appointment gaming, which is, hey, at 5 o'clock I'm going to put the Xbox on and play a game, is actually not as prominent as it once used to be, because, hey, less people have consoles, more people have PCs, which can be accessed anywhere. More importantly, people have mobile phones. And so having cloud allows you to scale up when demand increases. And whereas it's now not predictable at 5 p.m. every day, someone will be like, hey, I'm working from home, I'm just going to grab my phone, play a game for 30 minutes just to unwind or take my mind off work. Yeah. That's going to cause a spike in demand. And that's where I think cloud is so important now, because the predictability of demand for your games is starting to become a little bit more unpatterned, so to speak.
Oh, gotcha. So let's maybe rewind back a little bit, because I guess we've talked a bit about maybe how some of the trends are evolving. Let's look, as we've kind of hinted a couple of times, at that almost classic way of working. So I've got Minecraft up on screen here. I'm going to be playing on my PC for now. I could have gone on my Xbox or my phone or whatever, but for ease, I'm just going to go with the PC. And there's a couple of ways I can play the game, right? I can go ahead, have my own world, do that locally, but maybe I want to go play with my friends wherever they're located across the world, like we were saying. So that's where I would go and have a particular server. So what we can do inside of Minecraft, just as an example, if I just remove this one for now, is I can go and add an external server. Now, this isn't for anyone who's trying to figure out what's going on here. It's not like as soon as I enter the details here, a server magically gets spun up somewhere. This is more like a pointer or a reference saying, right, I've got a server that I've created already. This is kind of where it lives. This is the address of it. Go and connect to that place. So Blue Peter style for anyone listening in the UK. I've already made one earlier, so I'm just going to go ahead and and add that in. I guess moving across the States, Blue Peter isn't really a thing for you there, no?
No, we don't get Blue Peter over here, unfortunately. No, but they should. It's a great TV show.
So what I've just done there is I've typed in the IP address of a server. So like I say, at some point I'll edit in the footage. So you may have already seen it. Maybe I'll bring it in already if you're viewing this. But I've created a server in Azure already. So created a server, a virtual machine in North Europe, and went ahead, updated it to make sure I'm on the same client version that I'm playing on my PC, same version that's running on the virtual machine there as well. So on my other screen, which I'll switch over to for the recording, what you'll see is I've got a console running which says the server started. So in theory, I can go ahead now, save that in Minecraft, go and click join server, and assuming that everything works as expected, I should be able to go ahead and connect into my game there. So actually I can see things are working because it's telling me that player's connected, and there we go. It's nighttime. great for recording and actually having my lights and everything. I can barely see. But I guess in a nutshell, this is what we're talking about, right? With the classic kind of world, is that I'm now connected to a specific server, a specific instance, right? So there are some challenges with that, I guess. If something happens to that server, for example.
Yeah, I mean, the old joke, switch it off, put it back on again. That's really hard to do when you've got thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of players, and service quality or service level commitment to your customers is becoming more and more important. If someone's paying a tremendous sum of money, actually, which a lot of people are doing nowadays, you have an obligation to ensure that there's uptime in terms of your game. And having that as let's say, an on-premise or a kind of a server where you don't have those contingencies, which become extraordinarily expensive when you kind of do it one-off and you don't have the economies of scale like an enterprise company would have. It's more important that you actually consider how you keep your game uptime. And it's not just a matter of kind of technology failures, by the way, which I think a lot of people nowadays think how a cat server goes down, there's a problem, there's a bug. It's actually security. DDoS, pardon me, is a huge kind of challenge for a lot of game companies nowadays. As I mentioned, games have become platforms, and platforms have become targets because they're monetizable, they're small companies. And so protecting your game from being, in other words, attacked is super important. You kind of hear in the news sometimes around the holidays, peak times, some multiplayer servers and other platforms always get targeted, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. And so ensuring that you have a cloud product that has security built into it, that has DDoS protection, and that's one of many protections, is really important. Obviously, security aside, ensuring that you have a cloud that has backups and contingencies that can kick into place, not just one site, but many other sites around the world, and fail-safes, is also important to ensuring that you're able to maintain that experience for your players.
Absolutely. Multitasking is going to be fun for me in this session while I'm running around on the game, listening and talking.
I haven't managed the art of doing that yet.
Yeah, I'm not the best at it, but I have been following. And I think if we just do something interesting here, right, and just a little bit of a simulation, what I'm going to do on the other screen here is I'm just going to go ahead and close the game server down. So not going to actually change the virtual machine or anything. The virtual machine's still up and running. It's just the fact that that server, the application running on it, has gone down. And as you can see there, I've now disconnected from the server. I'm now interrupted from playing that game. I think that's the idea when we really break it down, is when we have these games which are services, you get all of those things that you were just talking about a moment ago there, Lee, which is, that resilience, that protection of things like security, and making sure you build those things in. This right now is just a virtual machine that I, as an end user, have to run in my own cloud subscription, that I have to go and love and manage and maintain. Is that something I really want to do as an end user? Probably not. So it's a shift, I guess, away from thinking about that as something that I have to go and own, like you say, to being more of a service-based approach there.
Yeah, and you just said something as well that says that, as a user, and if you define, how do I know you're a user? You're a user 1000656, whatever that may be. And coming with you is personal information. And I found, this is something that I think is a lot of an afterthought. It's the most unexciting topic of any kind of business and gaming and browser, anything actually, is how do you look after your customers' data? And there's so many regulations and policies now, particularly in the EU. I recall, when I used to live in Europe and I used to live in the UK when it was part of the EU. Just the kind of the data protection requirements. A lot of people are putting their name and data in so that they can be identified when they log on to that distant server. And that has to be protected as well. That could be attacked, that could be hacked, that could, again, if you go down, you lose that data. And so ensuring that you have an infrastructure in place where that data is so valuable, irreplaceable, and protected within kind of local requirements is also a nice convenience to have, a headache that you don't have to think about.
No, absolutely. And I think you mentioned a really good point there, right? Which is, if we jump back to the title screen here of Minecraft, one of the things that you'll notice, right, is I've got my gamer name there. So, it's my Twitter name. I'm not particularly precious or private about it. People would guess that. But for some people, that might be something quite private, and that's something where this isn't something necessarily that Minecraft itself is storing away or using, but this is where things like Xbox Live come in, for example, right? And that's the underlying platform where games can then, I guess, leverage some of that data as they need. And interestingly, one of the things on my other screen that I see when I'm connecting to the server is I see my gamer tag, Red Oboen, and I've also got like an Xbox, I guess, an XUID relating to me as a user. So, like you say, making sure that information is held in a way which is secure and sensitive is equally as important, for sure.
Yeah, completely.
For sure. So I guess then we've looked at, the kind of server scenario. Something I want to explore a bit more, actually, as we just start thinking about maybe the complexities of this. And this is something maybe in the next session, I was thinking maybe we could talk about Halo. Play a bit of Halo. That's going to be really fun when try to multitask and do that at the same time. But thinking about this particular example with Minecraft, I think as a game with Minecraft, it makes a lot of sense in terms of, you're there, you're potentially building things, you're creating your world, whatever you're kind of achieving in the game. But something like Halo is a lot more fast-paced. There's a lot more going on. So if we think about the scenario here, where I've got a single server that I'm running on, fine, not really a big problem. If I had to try and get some resilience kind of platform there where I can run my Minecraft service, might be a bit more challenging, but probably going to be okay because, the state of the world that we're running in is probably not so complex, probably easy enough to replicate that back to the servers or across servers. But something like a Halo or a Call of Duty or whatever other game, for example, where you've got like bullets flying through the air, you've got all the physics to go and calculate, you've got all these different players, vehicles, all these different things. starting to try and scale that across different servers and across different instances is going to be really challenging, and not something I as an end user would care about, to be honest. Like I said earlier, I just want to go and play the game, right? I think that's probably a key difference to think about as well, like the back end state of the game.
Yeah, you take the likes of Halo and Call of Duty. There's single player functionality in those games, but there's also a huge multiplayer component to those games. And multiplayer, is a word that doesn't do it justice when you say multiplayer. It's actually in some cases, hundreds of players. And let's say, Chris and Lee are in a game together. Chris shoots Lee, and Lee's in Seattle. Chris is in the UK. We both have to be playing the same game. So if you take me out in a game, I need to have limitations in my game. Yeah. That has to be affecting my gameplay, where I can do what I experience. Similarly, when you're in a game with several others playing, if I move and I block a door, you can't get into that room. That affects how you progress in the game as well.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we have to be playing the same game. You can't have different instances running, because if I get that door before you block it, then it's no longer multiplayer, and we're not actually playing with one another. And to do that at scale, it's just phenomenal. The amount of computing power to be able to process that and send those signals back to the devices. I'm using an anonymous term, the devices that you're using, which may require different input. To be able to build that game back up locally again is phenomenal. Even more so when you do it, cloud streaming, but we can talk about that another time. It's incredible. And, there's companies now who are building software upon Azure. Reddington is a great example. Highly encourage you to look that company up. Actually have a real good integration with Minecraft, where you can have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people playing in the same game, and all those interactions are affected. It's mind-blowing when you kind of see that. You extend that thought then to massively multiplayer online gaming, and it just becomes kind of unbelievable what this computing power is able to achieve. But that computing power is scalable, and it requires quite a lot of computing power. The more interactions, if there's one person affecting 150 other people's games, that becomes a huge amount of processing to calculate that. And that's where scale is really, really important, and having kind of the latest equipment to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think when you start, compounding the problem with, like, I guess we talked about physics and that idea that if you're in Seattle, I'm in the UK, there is going to be obviously a long speed of light, right? We're not going to be able to make things really quick because of the fact that I'm halfway around the world compared to you. So things like that, and being able to factor in that lag, that latency between those different endpoints into the game and the calculations that you do is also something then that comes into play. And that's why that compute power is so important, because otherwise it's disruptive to the game and it just breaks that game experience and that immersion. And I think when you look at where, again, gaming is heading with things like virtual reality, that's just something which is absolutely a non-negotiable. I bought an Oculus Quest 2 last week, I think, or a couple of weeks ago, and started playing that. And even the slightest jitter makes a huge difference in terms of my immersion in that game. And if you had that with a multiplayer gaming scenario, it's going to completely break that experience. And
Well, something for another day, because it's a Pandora's box of a topic. But imagine what we just talked about, that amount of computing power required. And then ladder on top of that, your game isn't actually being processed locally. The entire gameplay is being processed on a server in the cloud and streamed back to you, the likes of xCloud or Stadia. Imagine that level of complexity. And that's where the lag is not so much of sending code back to you to replicate the game locally.
I've lost your sound, mate. There we go. I lost your sound for like now.
I'll blame the fact that the server's not working. No, I'm joking. But no, I was just thinking, you ladder on the fact that the processing of the game is done in the cloud, xCloud Stadia, and not only then are you kind of sending code and instructions back to a local device to replicate the gameplay based on multiplayer inputs, you're having to build the game in the cloud, replicate the actual gameplay that all those inputs do, and then stream that back to those individual players wherever they are in the world.
Yeah.
That level of complexity and that level of computing is insane. What that enables is actually insane. You know, you've seen the kind of the mock-ups of xCloud, people playing on their phones anywhere. It's exciting. It's also insane, just like the level of complexity that's involved there.
On something like this, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Laser Kishi. Yeah. You had it lying around somewhere. Yeah, and I think we've only been looking at it at one dimension, right? Like we haven't even been thinking about things like inventory and economy and all of that nuance to different kind of game styles as well, which then comes into play and how that starts interacting between different players as well. So I think there's a ton more for us to go and explore, but I think really what we wanted to do in this session was just focus on that simple classic game server scenario, wasn't it? And looking at the potential challenges with that. So I think that sets us up nicely for the next session where we go and talk about Halo and maybe talk a bit more about things like matchmaking and things like then routing to those different servers as part of that service then. I think that could be a good next session for us to go and look at. Yeah,
let's do it. Thanks for inviting me.
Cool. Awesome. So I guess we've talked, about 30, 40 minutes here now. Any thoughts that you kind of want to leave people with from everything that we have been talking about there in terms of that evolution of gaming and what you're kind of seeing going on?
I think that kind of evolution of gaming, or kind of moving from a game server to a game hosted server like another entity. When we think about like the evolution of gaming, it's not so much the technology within gaming itself; it's the limitations or the lack of, or the improvement in the limitations around the gaming. For example, when I first started at Microsoft, I looked after Xbox 360. It still had an Ethernet cord, had a disk tray, and now it was like you put a $40 game in there. And that was kind of how it worked. 40 hours of gameplay, you're set. As the advent of internet has improved, connectivity has improved, and various other things, downloading huge file sizes have just become like an afterthought in most cases. Add-ons, packs, maps. The ability to have that low latency gameplay has allowed for those experiences, massively multiplayer online experiences, to come to life. And so as we think about how gaming improves, it's not so much the graphic quality increasing, it's not so much the new advent of being able to do XYZ, it's what is around gaming, the technology that allows games to truly go limitless and beyond kind of what their current restrictions are. And it's super exciting as you look forward that has been achieved in 7 or 8 years. What could be achieved in the next 7 or 8 years? You mentioned earlier, something that didn't massively take off in the past, but I think that's something that's going to really come to fruition, particularly artificial intelligence. So yeah, enormously exciting to see what can happen. And awesome. Power of the cloud.
Excellent. So we'll do another one same time next month. Like we say, we'll do something maybe more Halo based, maybe start looking at a bit of matchmaking and how game servers can move towards that gaming service. So yeah, I guess we've got something to talk to next time. So Lee, thank you so much for joining, and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, no worries. Catch you very soon.